Good morning, colleagues in the chamber, colleagues joining us online, and Ireland FM, welcome to you as well. This morning's full council, Thursday the 9th of November 2023, starts with declarations of interest. So can I have any declarations of interest, please? No, thank you very much. Moving on, agenda item 2 is urgent items, and I have none. And then moving on into part 1, reports requiring a decision, the progress of the Town Hall Cultural Centre and Museum project. So I'll hand over to Nicola Stinson, our Strategic Director of Place, Economy and Environment. Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members. So this is the culmination of the last 9 months worth of work, and as you can see from the documentation that's tabled, there's been a significant amount of work done over those last few months, both by local people, stakeholders, community, and our consultants that have been working with us alongside this project. You'll see there are 6 recommendations in the report, and the report's really in 4 parts. One's an update on the business case that we're required to do for the Shared Prosperity Fund. One's the documentation required for National Lottery funding, and then we come on to details like the heads of terms for the new company, and finally we'll look at the funding gap and the Community Ownership Fund application that I propose we put in to help with that. So in a way, the first 2 parts are about existing funding bids that are in and the documentation that's required to support them. Then we'll look at the details of the heads of terms and the funding. So at the end of this, what's called development stage, we're required by a number of funders to do various pieces of work, and there's guidance out there on how to do that work and what that work should include. So we've had to go through a prescribed list, if you like, of documentation to support our applications, both for Shared Prosperity Fund and National Lottery. And they've worked alongside us as well along our journey over the last 9 months to say they've been acting as a critical friend all the way. We've met monthly. They've been saying things like you need to increase the level of detail in that document, and you need to do less on that one. So we've worked alongside them, and we had something called the midterm review as well, which gave us detailed feedback on the work we've done so far, which has all been very positive. It's been a hell of an effort by the team, both the Museum Association, by the community, by partners, stakeholders, and by the consultancy project team. So it doesn't come to an end now. There's a period of what I call sort of building for the next stage. So between November and March, there's still a significant amount of work to do. We've got less funding in that period, so it'll be around just tying up loose ends, making sure that architectural design is correct, working with contractors around the costs, and making sure we're ready to go when it comes to the next council report, which will be in March of next year, where we will hopefully have all the funding in place and a contractor alongside us to award a tender to. So we're at a critical point in our journey, and also the setting up of the new company. So following the work that this council did in terms of governance, the new company is starting to be established, the Articles Association have been drafted, and the trustee recruitment will start shortly with appointments in the new year. So there's still a lot to do over the next period. What I'll try and do now is just go in each part, just to give you a brief summary of what's in each section. So the Shared Prosperity Fund needed an update to the outline business case, so we've already got approval in principle for £5.8 million, but to release that funding, we had to do a further business case, an update on the outline business case that you'd already approved. And really the strategic case hasn't changed much, there's no significant changes there, but we have updated the policy context. The economic case has been strengthened. We've explained that it expanded the options and benefits. And importantly, we've proved value for money and a positive cost-benefit ratio, which is important from a funder's perspective. In the financial case, we've updated that with the latest business plan. And in the commercial case, we've made sure that we're adhering to public procurement rules. And we have a route through to procuring a contractor that we're in the process of at the moment. The management case sets out the project governance, which is also mirrored in the documentation with the National Lottery around setting up the community interest organisation that members have approved at a previous council meeting. So So that document, the recommendation there is that we endorse that submission to the Shared Prosperity Fund as an update to our previous business case submission. So then the next chunk of work, I suppose, in the report relates to the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and this is one that's very prescribed. When they gave us the funding, they gave us a list of work that we had to do, and those are the documents that are tabled today. You've had them electronically, but I thought it was useful just to have them tabled as well. But I didn't think a copy for everybody would be appropriate use of resources today. The assessment of the case that we submit will go before their board on the 12th of March next year. As I say, they've worked alongside us. They think our case is strong, and what they're trying to do is use the earmarked funding that's already in their pipeline of funding, capital funding, to help us along the journey. But all the documentation needs to be assessed by them and then formally presented to their board, hopefully with a recommendation of approval in March of next year. So the recommendation 2 seeks the approval of the formal submission of the documents that are set out, as well as some delegated powers to enable us to make any minor tweaks that we need to do. So subsequent to publication of the report, there's been minor updates, minor wording changes that we just need to update. So I've sought delegated powers in recommendation 3 to make sure that we've got the best quality document that's been submitted to the funders. The draft heads of terms is the next section of the report, and I think this is where we need a little bit of input from members around what needs to be included in the heads of terms. So in September, we came to you with a recommendation around those heads of terms, and you asked us to go and get some more detailed work done on that. Ashfords have been employed as our legal advisors in relation to the heads of terms, and they've come back with some suggestions around how you might structure your lease in terms of the length of the lease and the break clauses within it. And on page 14 and 15 of the report, there are a number of questions that Ashfords have posed to be answered by council. In particular, I would draw your attention to question 3, which is about how you want the break clause structured. And the recommendation from Ashfords is that we have a 45-year lease, but with a rolling break clause after 25 years. There's many different ways of achieving break clauses. That's their suggestion to us that we might want to consider. We'll have a discussion about that shortly. And I think Matt Stokes, as monitoring officer, is also on the call. He might be able to assist. Question 7 looks at, also within that, it looks at how we underlet any controls over any underletting of the premises. So basically, if we allow a new organisation to run the facility, who else can occupy it? So one of the suggestions that Ashfords has come back to us about is to say, should that just be to community-based organisations? Do you want to control that in your heads of terms? And that's probably a wise thing to do, with the exception of the cafe, of course, because that will be run as a commercial entity. And then the final big question to answer, I suppose, is around whether we want to add additional advertisement controls over and above what would come through the local, as ourselves as local planning authority. So in terms of the amount of adverts associated with the building, what's on the pavements, what's outside, how can we control it? Is it more effective to have some heads of terms and covenant control on there, as opposed to just depend on the enforcement from the planning side? So we have an opportunity in that section to have a discussion about those controls you might want to put in place. The final section of the report looks at the funding gap and how we're going to close that funding gap. And I did a bit of a punt in September to see if we might be eligible for something called the Community Ownership Fund, which isn't open to local authorities normally. But in our unique circumstances as a unitary authority, I made the case that we don't have parish councils in our area or community councils, and that we are setting up a new organisation to run the facility, or would we be eligible to apply for that funding? Now, that funding has a funding cap of 2 million capital and £50,000 revenue. I think it's quite an encouraging response that's set out in the report, and I think it's worth putting in an application alongside all the other things we're doing to bridge the funding gap, including value engineering and looking at other funding pots as well. So the recommendation there is that we have a look at putting an application in this next opportunity, which will be in December, we think. So once we've got this out of the way, with these submissions out of the way, I'll start then on drawing up an application to that fund based on the information that we've already provided through this process. So there are 6 recommendations set out on the report, and so I'll take questions in relation to the report and the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Mumford. Oh, sorry, your light's between the two of you. Councillor Dean.
I'll move it over here, actually. I just wanted to thank Nicola for the report and thank all the people that have been involved in the project so far. As Nicola says, we're coming to a critical point now. We're almost at the end of the development stage and almost at the point of delivery, and it's quite scary. There is still that funding gap that Nicola's addressed or talked about, and we'll talk about that further. And there's all the kind of detail now that we have to get right going forward to deliver this project. But I just wanted to say thank you very much to Nicola for all the hard work she's done. But also, I know consultants get a bad name, get a bad press, but the consultants we've been using, I have to say, have been absolutely fantastic. And, when you look at the number of documents attached to this report, you can see why we need them. I mean, my God, I don't know where you'd even start. So you need the experts on board to do that. But yeah, I just wanted to thank them and the Museum Association and everyone really who's been involved in the project so far. I know there's some questions to come and some comments about this, that, and the other, so I won't propose the recommendations just yet. So I'll open it to the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. If I could just ask the Chair of Council who's online with us if you'd like to comment at this stage.
Yes, I would. Thank you very much, Vice Chair, and thank you very much for standing in for me today to chair this meeting. Unfortunately, as you know, travel has messed me up somewhat, not surprisingly, and so I'm unable to be with you in person, but I'm with you in spirit, I'm with you on the screen, and I would just like to endorse everything that Councillor Dean has just said. There's been an immense amount of work in this project. Nicola needs a gold star. She has been brilliant and trying to pull everything together. It's a massive project for Silly, and she's been brilliant. And Tim Dean himself has been brilliant managing the project board. So I just really wanted to endorse his thanks, to everybody really, and to thank him for chairing that board, and give him my full support. I think it's an excellent project. I'm very pleased with the detail that's now come forward to everybody, and look forward to comments from other members now, but it has my full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Watt.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just a comment. I've got no problem with the recommendations, incidentally. I think they're well phrased and make a lot of logical sense. Just a comment on paragraph 22 and 23 of the commercial case. I've looked at the plans. I've got a copy of the plans in front of me. In fact, the revised plans. I can't see anywhere, and there's no mention on it at all, where the TIC will go. I'm assuming it would be in the first part, but then it goes on in paragraph 23 to say income will be generated from charged admission. So you can't charge admission to the TIC. I assume they're going to be differentiated, but just a comment on that. And also it said the final line of paragraph 23. It said the possibly TIC. So I assume that the intention to put TIC in there is not cast in stone yet.
I'll come back on that if that's okay, Chair. So the area where the TIC will be located will be in that entrance lobby where you've got the shop and the entranceway into the museum facility. So there's no charge to be in that area. So there's no admission to that area. It's an area that's open to everybody to use. The reason why it says we haven't got formal approval from the TIC is that we need to actually have a service level agreement or legal documentation in place. There's certainly a consensus and agreement that the TIC will be co-located there, and that will benefit both because it allows increased footfall to the facility. And often people went to the town hall anyway for the TIC, so it's the best location for the TIC as well. So there is a consensus of agreement around that, but the formal legal agreement is yet to be signed.
But thank you. I recall distinctly in the 1960s when the TIC was in the front office, exactly where it's proposed now. And Brenda Guy was in charge of it, and she would be handing out rat poison to farmers on one hand, and then sorting out people's accommodation problems on the other.
Sounds rather long. Councillor Marcus.
Right. Okay. I want to ask about money. So you mentioned the funding gap. Talked about that. Let's do that one first. And in, I think, paragraph 19, you kind of mentioned there's a funding gap of 1.48 million. Talked about the community ownership fund. Is that the only egg in that particular basket?
Okay, so the challenge I've got between now and March is to look at all the opportunities we've got for closing that gap. Now, we're not going to put all the eggs in one basket. We've got the Community Ownership Fund. Don't forget, we've also got we put a round 2 levelling up bid in for the scheme as well. So we're still in discussion with government around that round 2 bid for levelling up. So that's still an open opportunity. We've got to think about fundraising, and there's some work to do there. And we'd hope that the new company that's going to be set up will start that work early in the new year. There's some value engineering that we're doing at the moment, but we know there's some significant value engineering that we could do in looking at the structure moving forward to simplify that design if needs be. So we've got some cards up our sleeve in case we need to do some value engineering. But there's also other grants that we've just become aware of. So as in this next period, we'll be looking for those smaller grants, because at the moment we've been looking at the big ones. But there's things like the FIPL Historic Buildings Fund, that might be an opportunity too. So we're starting to look at ones that might be, 20, 30, 40,000, just to eke away at that funding gap. What we have got is support from all the funders. We've had an all-funder meeting to get around the table just to say, is there a willingness to work together to meet this funding gap? And that consensus around that table is we must. So we will reconvene that between now and March to make sure we get there and to find a way forward. The worst comes to worst, we value engineer it down, but I think that will be, we'll do that along the way to make things as simple as possible. But I think we still need a little bit more funding, so we'll continue to put those funding bids in between now and March and try and fill the gap completely.
Okay, so what I'm minded to, just to sort of reassure the public and to reassure ourselves, is to put a recommendation in. I'm not sure whether this time is right now or later, because we've got one more report coming about like the Sea Defence project, saying, this is the budget, it's not going over, you're not coming back to council saying we need an extra 2 million quid to finish it. But I'm not sure whether we do that now or whether we do that later on in March or when the next paper comes. Russell, could you advise on that?
Yes, I can, Councillor. My recommendation is that we leave it until the next report, whether that's February or March, where we actually let the contract for the works. And at that point, that is where we're contractually entering into the arrangements to deliver the scheme. At that point, we will know whether we have all the funding in place, whether there is a gap, and whether we have to value engineer the scheme or whatever the options are. At that point, I think you could put the recommendation in that the budget from the council's perspective is fixed and you have to deliver within it. I don't think today is the right time. We are still trying to attract additional funding at the moment, and until we've got that final contract in place with the final price from the contractor, we still don't know quite what the final cost is. So I think the next report, February/March.
I'm happy with that. While you're there, Russell, don't go away. In paragraph 67, we talk about ongoing costs. Are you happy that the council can cover, I mean, you say the costs aren't significant in the short, medium term. I'm thinking more the longer term, with building maintenance. There are big costs after year 5, year 10. And our record in looking after buildings isn't particularly good. Are we going to be making sure that that money is there and those jobs are done? You give us reassurance that that's going to be the case.
Yes, I can. As we sit here today, I would suggest that any significant spending is quite a number of years in the future and will be part of the council setting its budget and its priorities at that point. So obviously the budget is set by yourselves as elected members, so I can't guarantee, but can guarantee that we know how much it's going to cost and we will put it into the plans at that point in time, or whoever is running the council's finances at that time, because as I say, I think the biggest cost is 10 years plus. So, but yes, we know how much it is, and we do need to get into the habit of making sure that we build that into our medium-term financial plans when it's appropriate.
Okay. I've also got some comments on recommendation 4 about the heads of terms. I don't know, should I do those first of all on number 3 about break clause? I'm happy with the 45-year lease with break clauses after 25 years. But I also think we need some words about what happens if the organisation fails, and what's the notice period, who gets reversion of the ownership of the building, things like that. I'm happy to suggest that as a recommendation, or I don't know. Yeah.
That would be a sensible thing to do. Thank you.
Cool. On number 7, I think as a guiding principle, we should have non-commercial community-based organisations only, for long-term lets apart from the cafe, excluding the cafe. But that still gives flexibility for farmers markets and things like that. But, and that any long-term tenancy should come back to council for approval. Number 8, I would agree with the lawyers that all signage should be covered by the local planning authority rules, and that there shouldn't be any external signage for a cafe or museum, so no A-boards on streets or anything like that. We write that into the contract. That'd be my suggestion. Also, I don't know whether this goes into the heads of terms or not, but something about having a right to observe board meetings of the new organisation for us and major funders. Obviously, no voting rights. I don't know whether that's a separate recommendation or that goes into the heads of terms.
Your recommendation 7.
Okay. And do we need to ensure that in talking about ongoing cost and maintenance, do we need to write into the heads of terms about unfettered access, or is obviously landlord notice about making sure that we can get to the places that we need to in the appropriate time?
We'll make sure that's covered in the lease as well. Yes.
Well, that's a lot, but...
Councillor Bedford. Councillor Watt and Councillor Marcus have really stole my thunder about a couple of the questions, especially in regard to the role of the TIC. This has seemed to have dragged out, Nicola. I seem to be at so many meetings where we haven't really defined the role of the TIC in the new project, and and it's good that it is going forward, because that was the worry for me. I know it's probably not to do with the recommendations, but this is a massive project for these islands, and very much for it. I really think it is important for our community. However, I'm not sure how we're bringing the community with us. There's a phenomenal amount of information here that shows, the amount of work that you and your teams have done. It's colossal. And I'm still not sure that we're bringing the community on board. And although it's not down to recommendation, that's an uncomfortableness in me about not getting the story out there, how really amazing this project could be. People are getting more het up about how it looks and not the long-term potential about how this can rejuvenate St Mary's and the wider communities.
Yeah, Anita, that's noted. I think communications has been a challenge. And you've got, on the one hand, people are saying, just get on with it, we're fed up of hearing about it. And the others still wanting a detailed conversation about what craft setters might be in there. So it's a tricky balance, but we'll continue to try and address that. And your feedback's always welcome. So when you think there's a gap, please let us know, and we'll continue to try and support the community in understanding the scheme to the best of our ability. Okay.
If I could say from the Chair, we're coming now to a pivotal point in the project with decision-making pathways going forward, and possibly we're running up to Christmas now, but possibly in the new year we might think of another open event, possibly in this chamber, to let the community know exactly what we're actually achieving. And obviously I hope you'll be a pivotal part of that, Councillor Bedford. I couldn't see who put their light on first, so Councillor Peacock, I think.
Just picking up on Dan's point with commercial use of the building. I remember the old days of the 4-day sale, things like that. Just make sure we don't shoot ourselves in the foot should there be something that comes along on a very weekly basis. No, I'm not talking about renting out for seats of months or years. I'm on about a very short-term basis where there might be someone that comes along that just wants to use the building, for 2 or 3 days. Trade fair or something like that, or conference or something like that. Conference would be the bigger one for me. It may well be that we have people who want to hire the room as a conference. We need to make sure we enable that to happen.
Yeah, that wouldn't be an under lease, that would be an event to hire. So that will be covered off. And
also, the what if question. If we don't get the funding we require, is there a plan B?
So the value engineering then kicks in, and the further discussions with funders. So we'd then have to. So the value engineering is that you go back to your designs and look what's expensive, and say, for example, here's an example. One of the parts of the building, it's cantilevered over. It cantilevers over the pavement at the back. The cafe, it comes out to the street. That's quite an expensive way of doing things. There are other ways of achieving that are cheaper. There are examples where the building curves around and you've got curved glass. If you squared the building off, then that's cheaper. So it's at that point you start to compromise some of the architectural design to make it deliverable. So at the moment we're holding on to that architectural quality, but we might have to come back later if we haven't got the whole funding package with some suggestions about how we might value engineer it down. And I would have thought we probably would be having that discussion February time, if that's where we've got to, if we haven't got that funding, because we should know really by then. We'll have had some tentative feedback about other funding. So I would have thought we probably might need to do a workshop with members around what's the red line elements to this, and where are the bits that are just the bells and whistles that perhaps could be engineered down.
May I ask for the Chair before I bring in Councillor Sims, if that will obviously include looking carefully at the contingency that we built in these inflationary times?
So without wanting to say too much in public session, the cost estimates include a significant island weighting and risk weighting. So we'll hope as we develop the scheme to what's called REBA Stage 4, which is the detailed architectural drawings for building control purposes, that we'd have a better understanding of how we might be able to move the project forward.
Thank you, that's reassuring. Councillor Sims.
Yes, I'm glad Nicola explained value engineering, because I just think it's one of these woefully modern phrases that we don't need. It's cost cutting, isn't it? But anyway, with regard to Dan's comment a little bit a while ago about observers on the board. Now, we had a very useful conversation with Nima from the Arts Council the other day, and she made the point that, from their perspective, they would quite like to have observers on the board, i.e. so council as the landlord and significant funders. I think that would be, I would suggest that's what we do, and then cover that at this point. Otherwise, somebody else got a light on. I'm happy to propose the recommendations.
Do we need to propose the suggestions I made first, or?
Yeah, I think you need to put your recommendations forward in relation to recommendation 4, which is a response to table 1, which if that makes sense. And then I think you've got an additional recommendation 7, which incorporates the governance issues. So should we go through that in detail? I think Andy's probably made some notes, and I've made some notes, but if you go through it, we'll see where we get to.
Okay, so amendments to recommendation 4. The first one is 45-year lease, break clause after 25 years, and then every 5 years after that. We also need, I don't know how to say this in a recommendation, but some words from the lawyer about reversion if the organisation fails to the new offer. Yeah, that won't work. Guiding principle about subleasing non-commercial community-based organisations only, which would be approved by council. The cafe is an exception to this. You're looking at me, Anita? Yeah. And that's sub-leases are long-term, not short-term, by definition. And all advertising is controlled by the signage rules by the local authority. External by local planning authority, and no street advertising. People happy with that? No boards on the street? Yeah.
Just to clarify, then you had recommendation 8 referring to the signage and recommendation 9 referring to observer rights at board.
I haven't even done.
You're still at recommendation 4, right?
Yeah. So we're still amending recommendation 4. The advertising was the last amendment to recommendation 4. Adding recommendation 7, which is reserving the right to observe the council and major funders, reserving the right to observe the new organisation's board meetings, but not have any voting rights at all. Do we also need to have something there, a recommendation about access for maintenance, or is that going to be in the lease?
And let's just make a note in the recommendation so it's covered and minuted and in public record.
Okay.
Yeah.
So can we have a recommendation about making sure that we get unfettered access to carry out our maintenance tasks? So an amendment that's going to be in the heads of terms. Yeah. So that's not. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense for everyone.
Councillor Dean.
I think so. Yes, from what you said, I'm happy to second your recommendations, changes to the recommendations.
Would it be best to have a recommendation now that Council approve all of the recommendations that Councillor Marcus has proposed, and then we can take the recommendations one by one, when I would much value Councillor Marcus's able assistance. So, amendments.
Yeah, we do the amendments first.
So we take the amendments first, but if we can we take, if it's appropriate, perhaps I could be guided on this, to take a general proposal that we approve the recommendations that Councillor Marcus has suggested. Is that satisfactory?
I think Councillor Marcus has proposed the amendments, and I've seconded them. So we just need to vote on.
I think it's fine.
Vice Chairman, to do as you say, and as Councillor Marcus says, you can take them on block as proposed and seconded as amendments to the main recommendations, and then go back after that to all of the recommendations and vote on block, or individually if you wish.
Thank you. Right. So we have a proposal to accept the recommendations suggested by Councillor Marcus. Can I have a proposer for that, please? Fine. The seconder, Councillor Dean. So all those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Yes. Now going back to the main recommendations, I'll take advice from the Director as to whether we do those singly or en bloc.
I think we can take them on block. I don't think there's been that much controversy in the debate.
Thank you.
I've already proposed them, so.
Okay. So, Councillor Sims, are you proposing that we accept all
I'll propose them again, yeah.
Fine. And Councillor Dean is seconding. Can I have a vote on the acceptance of all of the recommendations with the amendments? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. So thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance and your comments. So we can close the meeting at 11:07. 10:07, sorry. The clock.